All right, I'll get started. Thanks for joining, everyone. This is our May monthly webinar. Today, I'll be going over some advisor updates like usual. Naomi will be going through the slides that we'll use for the advisor year-end work days. And Brian will finish up with some info about the statewide longitudinal data system grants. We also have a pre-recorded video this month, just a quick overview of the CDC District and Schools collection, as I call it, officially known as the ESU District System School Information Report. That's, the collection where you go to enter data about your school buildings, as well as some other info related to that. So, all right, I'll go ahead and get started with advisor status update. First of all, as I'm sure a lot of you noticed, we had a kind of a major hardware issue on Monday, and so the servers were down all day. We've kind of been still recovering from that. I know this morning there's some reports that are missing data. We are working on reloading those right now. Some of the overnight loading stuff is still crashing, but anyway. So first, I wanted to review a little bit more on instructional units, which is something I talked a lot about at last month's meeting, which again, of course, if anyone wants to go see that, we have the recording and slides posted here on the nedataconference.com website. But some of the terms I've been using, I wanted to define again, just because this will keep coming up as we talk about this course data. So this is the official EdFi terminology here, which is often may not really match with the terminology you think of when you're working in your student information system. But as far as advisor and EdFi itself defines it, at the very top level, there is a course. So NDE is providing course data. This is really just defined by the state course code. So we push this data into advisor. Some of the SIS vendors actually read the data down from us. And this is just a list that's per year. It's one entry per state course code. Now, the first thing that you in the SIS upload to us in advisor is the course offering. And this is kind of a weird data element. I don't know if a lot of people think of the data this way, but the course offering is defined by that state course code plus a term code. So if this is also where you set up your local name for your course, but if you have a course that is offered in both semesters, you'll have two entries in the course offering. And this comes up because this is where the instructional time plan, our new field this year, is reported to. Below that is the section, and I think, most of us are familiar with what a section is. As far as advisors defined it, though, this is defined by, again, the state course code and the term code, like the above, but also now it's defined by your primary teacher and your section number or your section identifier, whatever that unique code is. So this is where the section delivery field is attached. So the section as a whole is either distance learning or it's in the classroom, which is not really something I was talking about today, but I just thought I would add that. Below that, even further, is the student section record. This is where this has all of the same fields that define a section, but now also you're attaching a student ID. So This is where you're listing the actual students inside that section. This is where you report to us the attempt status, if they failed, withdrew, etc. This is also where we report the dual credit flag. So for each student in the section, did they were they enrolled for dual credit? Did they get the dual credit or not? So I bring that up because we've been getting a lot of feedback on problems with the instructional units. I think a lot of it is coming from PowerSchool, and I can explain why. So if you remember this graph at the top here, this little chart is something I covered last month. But just pointing out that when we're calculating instructional units, we're looking at both the state course code and the term code to separate these amounts. So in this example, the first row is a year-long version of a course, and it's got 7,600 minutes, which gives you 8.48 IUs. However, a lot of the SISs, I think, or districts, it just kind of depends on how you set your courses up, may often be reporting a year-long course, but as a semester 1 and a semester 2 section, where you are expecting students to have to enroll in both. So to make the math work out on our side, we see both of those, and we'll assume, and we're going to add up those two numbers. So in a perfect world, each of those semesters is reported with a roughly half the minutes. And so we get about half the IUs for each, but then we add them up at the end. But we are getting feedback. A lot of PowerSchool districts are doubling up the amounts here. And it kind of makes sense. As I've studied this a little bit, I realized PowerSchool is essentially collecting the planned minutes for a course on what they would call a course page. So, well, I don't know if they call it that, but what I would call a course page. PowerSchool collects the number at that very top level here, but they have to send it to us here in the course offering, which is also defined by the term code. So kind of just an unfortunate situation there. I know Nebraska PowerSchool Support has been dealing with this. I think their recommendation has been to just have the minutes reported so that basically you don't want to end up with a year-long course split into 2 semesters, but then each semester says that a student is getting 8,000 minutes in each semester, which could be correct if you were a block schedule district, but definitely kind of an annoying effect of how we decided to do the instructional units calculation. I'll definitely be discussing this with accreditation office here. At the moment, though, many people might be getting double credit unless you go adjust the minutes that you are reporting. Couple other things on instructional units I wanted to bring up that I didn't cover last time, but we've been getting a couple of questions since last month. One thing we've always had in our instructional units calculation that I didn't mention before is that we max out any single course code at 10 units, 10 being, an absolute full year, the most amount, essentially. So to avoid having any weird effects where things are, getting double counted, like I've mentioned, it's happening, we top everything off at 10 units. So if you're getting this double counted problem, you may just see a lot of courses are coming in at exactly 10 units, instructional units. That's because probably the way the math ended up, you were getting like 19 instructional units, and we pulled it down to 10. Also, another thing that comes up, because I know this is kind of unfortunately similar terminology. But anything where we're talking about instructional units, this new report that's an advisor, that there are instructional unit requirements in Rule 10. These are based around the planned time for courses. These are basically the requirements that are in basically making sure that you're offering enough courses at your high schools. It's not based on the actual time after the year's done when you look back and can calculate exactly how many hours and how many minutes everyone was there. There are instructional hours or instructional program hour requirements, however. These are based on the actual time spent in session during the year. And this is collected in the CDC. Nothing is changing about this collection. Here's just a screenshot of that CDC collection if you haven't seen it. This is you're reporting in whole hours, and it's supposed to be the hours actually in session. If you've had weather days, etc., that factors into your calculation. So that instructional hours is about actual time spent in class. Yeah, question from Patty. I was trying to run the SPED post-school outcome report, and the SPED discipline report shows no data. Is that due to the site being down earlier? Maybe, Patty. I am not sure offhand, but I will look into that. Like I said, I'm running some automated things right now as we are meeting, actually. So check for a message on the advisor validation site. Suzanne asked, are the instructional hours in the CDC going to be compared to the instructional units from the courses? I'm not aware that that is a something that was definitely planned from the accreditation office. Although it is that does bring up an interesting idea. Yeah, that is something that could maybe be done, but instructional units are, you know, we're collecting a different amount of minutes for each course, but that doesn't necessarily tell us how long your actual school day is. Instructional hours are really about, you know, your overall school day, how many, you know, how many hours that school is in session. The minutes for each course don't necessarily tell us that exactly. Although, yeah, in general, yeah, if you have a year-long course that meets every day, well, but even then, that's only one period in your day. Anyway, my point is they don't really match one-to-one exactly. Although, yeah, it is something I've thought about. Is there some kind of analysis that could be done there? I don't think we've said anything about doing that at this time. All right. There is another new report in the system, and this, unfortunately, this is one of the reports that, as it says here in the description, is updated overnight in a data load, and it is one that is blank right now. So I'm hoping within an hour or two here, I will get everything up and running again. But I still want to go over this report and just cover a little bit about it, see what other questions anyone has. So this one is called Teachers Properly Endorsed Percentage. This is another report that previously our accreditation office had used internally, part of verifying parts of Rule 10 compliance. As the description says here, it's teachers who are fully endorsed. We're fully endorsed, meaning both you have the endorsement for the content they're teaching, as well as it's at the proper level, like, you know, elementary, middle, or high. You know, the kind of depends on the endorsement for the course. So we also count courses here by grouping up state course codes and term codes. It kind of is a little bit different for elementary and middle versus high schools. There's a slight different calculation. I'll go over that. Again, this is another course report that's based on data that's built overnight. And we're only counting sections that have proper data, meaning a section that includes a primary teacher and it has at least one student in the section who has not, withdrawn or failed out of that course. So here's a redacted example of what this report looks like when you first click into it. It's grouped into elementary and middle schools above, secondary and high schools below. It does mention teacher FTE in some places. Here we're pulling the FTE for teachers from what you've reported in staff reporting, in SSRS staff reporting. And then the actual percentages that we're looking at are here on the right. And they're blue links because if you click in them, you'll get to see details about how we get to that percentage. So here is what that detail sub-report looks like. It lists each individual teacher you have. These are teachers that have been reported as a primary teacher on a section. We do, like I said, list the total FTE for that teacher at that school. Here, it's used in the elementary and middle calculation. I will get to that on a later slide. So it says here, qualified semesters taught, unqualified semesters taught. We kind of had to come up with a way to count the courses, but we didn't use the instructional unit calculation exactly. Especially with all the issues we're having with that. I'm not sure if we will. But for now, basically, this is a count of semesters. So we're looking for, kind of like the course offering I mentioned before, we're looking for distinct state course codes and distinct term codes. And then counting the semesters. A year-long course will be 2 semesters, quarter course will be a half a semester. So then on the right here's a few examples I'm pointing out. So this first row, this teacher, they're part-time, half-time teacher, at least at this school. They taught 1 semester at that school and they were fully qualified. So this row here has got 6.5. I don't know exactly what they taught, but for example, this person may have taught 3 different year-long course codes, so 6 full semesters, plus a 4th course with 1 more quarter, so they ended up with 6.5 semesters. And down here, you see someone who's got this number in red. Actually, I don't, that's not correct. This is, so they actually taught 4 semesters total. Maybe they taught 4 different semester-long classes, but out of those 4, 1 of them, they are not qualified. Either they're not endorsed or they're endorsed at the wrong level. And this, as Suzanne has asked, is this related to the NSSRS report? Yes. So we are pulling that same data that you see here in this old, the old NSSRS validation report, teachers assigned out of endorsed area or level. And if you see a teacher that's flagged in that report, generally that means they're going to have a red number when you find them in this report. One last thing I had mentioned, you'll notice that the elementary and middle schools say percent qualified of FTE versus percent qualified courses. We do the calculation slightly different here. For your elementary and middle, generally, we're expecting teachers are going to have 1 year-long self-contained classroom course. That's the 180000 course. But per rule, we want to look at their FTE. So essentially, we take their course data and prorate it by the FTE. So if you have a teacher who only has 50% FTE, they will only count towards your overall qualified percent, 50% as much as a teacher who's full-time. For the high schools, we basically just don't do that. We're simply just adding up the courses. We're adding up the total semesters taught, and then looking at the percent that are qualified versus the overall qualified plus unqualified total. Here's the couple of bits from Rule 10, which is basically why this report exists. Under Section 7, there's a piece for elementary, middle, and high schools. So that's this elementary here. The goal is to get a minimum of 90%, 95%. So if you have this, any number here, for an elementary that's under 95%, I'm sure accreditation will look at that. And like it says, it's based on a full-time equivalency. For middle schools, it's looking for 90%. And for high schools, it's looking at 80%. But I just wanted to include the language directly out of the rule, in case you're wondering where this comes from. So that's all I wanted to cover on that report for now. Any other questions on this? I'm sure as you get in there and start looking, we'll probably get some more tickets and some more questions here. So maybe at our next meeting, I may cover it some more. But yeah, please let us know if you're confused about anything in here. I can always go back and add more notes and documentation into the report. Right now, the look of the report, basically, I've given you an exact copy of what our accreditation office would get for your district. All right, not seeing any come in. So again, like I said, this report, if you go look at it right now, you're not going to see any data. It is rebuilding. So like I said, I'll put a notice on the advisor validation once that is done. One last thing, I wanted to remind you of the PEBT collection. The first collection due date is next week. So this is, these are the dates that Jenna from our nutrition services team shared last month. But just a reminder, we're interested in fall semester data, so August 2022 to December. We want to hopefully get that from you around May 15th. If you're having troubles uploading, please put in a ticket and we'll take a look. I've got some lag time to work through all those issues so that I can send the data off to DHHS by the week following. And then it takes a while for them to generate payment cards and send everything out. So if any people are wondering, that's when generally the cards first get mailed, would be June 22nd. This is, again, this is the school year PBT benefits, where you are sending us the list of students who were absent due to COVID, who are free or reduced lunch students. And we have basically 3 collections coming up. There's one for the fall semester, one for the spring semester is going to be June 30th, as well as if you missed getting the fall semester data, feel free to submit it before June 30th and we'll grab it there. And there will be a summer 2023 collection, just like previous summer collections for PBT. It's open to any students who are receiving free or reduced lunch. And the date scheduled for that is July 28th. I'm sure we'll be covering that again. Just a reminder, there was a presentation about this last month in the recording under the April meeting, as well as the slides here from Jenna. So definitely go back to that if you have any more questions on PBT. Becky asked for PBT, districts should submit 1 file per month. That's correct. The PBT system makes you choose a single month before you upload a file. So for each month, you're sending us the number of days absent that student had in that month. That's all I have. If you have any more questions, please pop them in. Cheryl just asked, is there any new info on the CRDC report date? I did just look at this a few days ago, Cheryl, and I do not see that an official date has been announced yet still. I'm still expecting probably late summer, early fall maybe, but I really am not sure what's going on with the Office of Civil Rights and the data collection. So as soon as I hear, we will include something in the bulletin on that. All right, I'm not seeing anyone else. Last chance. All right, I'll turn this over to Naomi to go through the year-end collection. Do you want to
Thanks,
share, Naomi?
Yeah, I can do that.
Okay. Take it away.
So I think thank you. Let me know if you can't see my screen, but you should be able to.
You're good.
Okay, so one of the things I wanted to start with was to let you know, as Max has probably already mentioned, the PDFs for all of these presentations are on the data webinar site right now. And so I think as I go through these slides, there's a ton of hyperlinks and resources within the presentation. So I just wanted to make sure you knew it was here. If you're a person who likes to follow along, click through the links, see what the different web pages are. I just wanted you to have that resource as we go through this. This is the presentation that we're going to go ahead and run through before every one of our work days that we have scheduled, I think end of May, early June. There's 3 of them. I'll kind of get into the web link there. So that'll be kind of the preface. If you do have questions, please put them in the Q&A. I might hold off, Max, maybe as you're managing the Q&A, keep some in there that would be good content to discuss to the greater group at the end, if you think that that would be helpful. So with that said, I'll go ahead and get started here. So this is the presentation. Like I mentioned, we're going to be talking about it at our advisor year-end work days. That said, there's some really good information in here relating to other collections. So this presentation is going to talk about what's staying the same year over year when it comes to your year-end 22-23 reporting. We'll talk a little bit about staff, a little bit about consolidated data collection, CDC, and then a big chunk of our time will be spent talking about advisor. We'll talk through some updates that occurred this year that were changes year over year about staff and advisor. And then I'll also go through some stuff that's coming soon next year for 23-24 advisor. At this time, there's no massive changes proposed for staff reporting or CDC, so there's not really much to share with you. And then there's, like I said, some great resources. So the things that are staying the same when it comes to your year-end reporting for the 22-23 school year: staff reporting still due June 15th with an audit window of the 30th. We still have that secondary collection and SSRS validation where you can check your errors in your reports. And then also the third collection, NDE staff ID, which is a great resource if you need to look up staff ID numbers. The consolidated data collections, we have several open right now. Those still are due June 15th with an audit window through the 30th. And then the advisor validation collection still has your errors, warnings, lookups, and verification reports. So I'm going to dig into each of these a little bit more thoroughly here. So we'll start with staff reporting. We've got a link to the staff manual, which is a really great resource if you're not sure, like if you need to have a definition for one of the data elements that's collected in there. I also want to make sure to highlight here that after June 30th, we can't make changes to staff reporting data. So it's so important that schools and districts are going through and looking at their year-end collections here in staff reporting specifically. Kind of talk through these kind of year-end updates, right? Because you put everything in at the beginning of the year, but maybe at the end of the year, you have to add a completion date for a staff person who left midway through the year. You know, the substitute days worked. You're going to want to make sure that those are totaled and tabulated for the end of the year. And then just making sure that when you're in the staff reporting collection, all your staff are listed as green and there's no errors within the collection itself. A couple helpful useful tools I talked about: the NAE staff ID collection, where you can look up and create staff IDs. And then also the CERT lookup site can be really helpful if you're trying to see how someone is endorsed, if they're certified, when their CERT expires, and that's this link here. Then the other collection that's related to staff reporting is the NSSRS validation collection. So you've got staff reporting done, you've made your updates. Next day, go into NSSRS validation. Take a look at the errors that are there. This collection allows us to take the data you reported in staff reporting and kind of compare it to different systems, whether it be, you know, certification, any of this kind of stuff. So we'll have some errors that are important to review there. And then there's a bunch of verification reports specific to staff data that can also be really helpful. Maybe even printing a current personnel report for the end of the year. So you know, okay, end of this year, this is what we reported. This is the data we've got there. So I won't go through all these reports, but it's important to kind of review some of those as part of your year-end process when it comes to staff reporting. Next, we'll talk a little bit about consolidated data collections, the CDC. So we've got a resource page here. It lists all the instructions for every collection within the CDC, so that can be helpful. I already talked about that the data is due on June 15th. The owners of these collections will contact you if they haven't seen completed it, if they need some updates made in that audit window, and then the collections close on June 30th. So a few of the collections that are within the CDC that are due at the year end. We've got the Human Resources Director contacts. This has been open all year, but it's important that you update that so the CERT team knows who to contact when it comes to HR stuff. We've got the Days in Session Instructional Program Hours collection. Max mentioned that earlier. There is, if you are short on hours, there's an affidavit for instructional hour exception. And this is a web link to our bulletin where they shared a bulletin recently about how to submit that if you think you're going to be short on those program hours. Now, this is specifically to publics, right? Only publics have to complete the instructional program hours. But if we've got some non-publics, they also have to do the days in session. So depending on the type of system you are is the data that you submit in that collection. We've got the Nebraska Education Profile, or the NEP information collection in the CDC. That's due. The annual participation report for our federal programs team, pupil transportation report for the finance folks, the ESU district system school information report that Max talked about. Put a link in here to the pre-recorded presentation if you want a little more information on that. And then the optional collections that are request to submit data later, make data changes, and the grad cohort resolution requests. So those are CDC collections open year round if you need them. All right, so now let's get into advisor validation. You're getting ready to look at your year-end and review everything. So the data that we're collecting at the end of the year includes your demographic information, enrollment, your completers, your graduates, attendance data, discipline, courses, including that instructional time plan Max spent a lot of time talking about, grades, all these various programs. We've got SPED, early childhood, Rule 18. We've got the 21-22 Perkins 5 post-school survey, and we've got SPED post-school outcomes data that you're going to want to review as well as part of that process. This link here takes you to the advisor validation calendar where we kind of break all that out and we say what we're using the various data for. So I'm going to list that out here a little bit on this slide. The reason we collect this data at the end of the year: data aid calculations, NEP information. The SPED information is huge because we use that for both state and federal reporting. We've got AQuest, statewide assessment, cohort. There's lots of reasons that we're collecting this information. So I'll kind of let you read through this, but this is again also in that calendar, but it's really helpful to see and understand the why of we're collecting this information at the end of the year. Okay, so a couple things to highlight about advisor validation that are the same year over year. this 21-22 Perkins 5 post-school survey, this data is collected now, but it's actually relating to last year's advisor data. So you're going to actually change your school year in advisor validation to 21-22. And then you're going to go to these verification reports here and review the data to make sure that it's accurate. Similar thing can be said for the SPED post-school outcomes, excuse me. Last year's SPED exiters, a survey was sent to them literally just earlier this month, or it is in the process of being, the data was pulled recently. So now when you're looking at 22-23 and you're starting to report some of those SPED exiters, you want to make sure that the information that they need to do this survey, address, et cetera, is in advisor validation for these kiddos, because then next spring, we pull this information from the 22-23 database and we send the survey information that way. There is a change year over year in that for the 21-22 SPED exiters, the survey we just sent, the ages were 14 plus, or 16 plus, excuse me. Next year, the age is going to be 14 plus. So it's going to include a few more kiddos in the survey next year. All right, so you're in advisor validation. You're like, where do I begin? I'm just starting. Start with your errors and warnings. I've highlighted a few of the sections here that are data sets and some of the errors that we see that are more critical, ones that you really want to pay attention to, because what you want to do is you want to get your information in advisor validation, and then you want to see kind of what doesn't match, and that's what these errors warnings are telling you. So for demographics information, you may have demographics information missing for a student who has an enrollment record in advisor, but it's missing that demographic data. Well, we can't use that unless we have the full set. Potentially no race reported for the student. That's required data in order for us to do a lot of our reports. When it comes to enrollment, maybe no current school enrollment record exists for a kiddo that was enrolled last year. What happened to this kid? We haven't seen anything in advisor that indicates that this kiddo has been exited, transferred out, whatever. So we want to make sure that you're reporting that now, because last year there was no exit information. Another enrollment error we see a lot is a student in grades K through 8 without an enrollment record. Exit code, same thing, who do not appear in the following school year. There's some course errors and warnings. This one is a new one this year, so that's why we're highlighting it. Max talked about it a lot during his presentation. High school course with no planned instructional time reported. Now, this is a warning. It's not a critical error, because it's one of those warnings or errors that we're saying, hey, you've sent us this data. It looks a little funky. It could be right. You may have intentionally not reported instructional time on this particular kiddo's course. Okay, but take a look, because maybe you need it to, and maybe you need that information for your instructional units report. We've got early childhood errors, an example being 455, a PK grade student not reported with either early childhood program or a special education program record. And that kind of leads me into the SPED errors. There's a lot of SPED errors. And again, I'm going to highlight how important it is that we're capturing and fixing this information now versus waiting, or if it gets too late and then we can't make the change. Both state and feds utilize this information to do the reporting. And sometimes, like, the feds won't even accept the data if it's not accurate. So it's just so important to be reviewing those errors in that data. Attendance data, say perhaps error 735, you have no absences reported at a school. So you have a whole school that has perfect attendance. Sounds kind of crazy, but maybe you do. That one's particularly a warning. So it's not an error. You don't have to fix it, but it's saying data looks funky, take a look. We've got some grad cohort errors and then some discipline errors as well that you should be reviewing as part of your year-end data. So this particular discipline one is saying the discipline length is missing for a suspension or expulsion. So if for some reason you're reviewing your errors and you can't click through them, potentially you're missing some security level access as relates to the portal in your advisor validation collection. So talk to your portal district administrator, and they may need to give you some additional activation codes. If you're still struggling, submit a ticket to the service desk and we can help figure out what's going on there. I did put a link in here as well to our help site, and we have a few, and I say a few because we don't have all the errors documented, but we have a few errors documented where it talks about how you can fix those and goes into a little bit greater detail to help you with that. So that can be useful. Once you've reviewed your errors and your warnings, what's next? Well, maybe as you're reviewing your errors and warnings, you have some questions and you're not quite sure. Now, why is this error showing up? I don't understand. It's in my student information system correctly. Why is the advisor saying there's an error? Use your lookups. They're a really super helpful tool to research these errors and warnings. Example, enrollment lookup by ID, student lookup by ID. The service desk uses these a lot. The enrollment can be helpful because you can see multiple school districts. Let's say a kiddo has transferred a lot over the couple years. You can see all of those years of data for one kiddo. And then the student lookup by ID is really helpful if you're trying to figure out why one kiddo is showing up in this particular error. It shows you everything reported about that kiddo for this school year. So that can be really helpful. There's student lookup by demographics if you want to look up specific to one of the demographic data points. There's a SPED lookup, especially helpful for a lot of your SPED data. And then there's some various other programs lookups for career ed, early childhood, homeless, and Rural 18 data. All right, so you've used your lookups, you've gone through your errors warnings, you're feeling pretty good about everything. The next step in the process is to review your verification reports. So we've got a really helpful Excel file here at this link at the very bottom of the page that tells you which reports to review during each collection window. So right now we're focused on year end, but that Excel file also has data that talks about fall and the follow-up collection. So you can utilize it for that, but we really want to focus on year end reports. When you're looking at your reports, there's different reporting windows frequently within each report, and that helps you kind of filter the data into a specific window. So we'll talk through some of these reporting windows. You've got full year. So this report will display students that are enrolled in your district at any time throughout the school year, even if they're already exited. So that can be helpful if you want a big picture. You've got as of today. So what's interesting about this one is you could run a report right now today, and the second you report your completers and you run this report after that, they may not show up because you've exited them. So it's an interesting way to look at data too. As of October 1st, this has to do with a membership count date. This is live data. So let's say, and I'll go to the next slide here, the reason I say that, because we also have an as of October 1st locked window. So this is the data you submitted in the fall that talks about that October 1st membership count date. We locked it. We locked it down. That's what we use for state aid, all these different reports. The as of October 1st unlocked is your live data. So you can still make changes to that data, but it's not going to show up in the locked report. It's just going to show up in your live data. So you can kind of look at the two different things. The same philosophy is for your end of year reports. So starting earlier this month, any reports that had that end of year window is going to display those. So these are the kiddos who are enrolled at the end of the year. And this is the data that's going to be locked on or around June 30th, that deadline. So once this locked reports are ready in July, you'll be able to see the data that was locked at the end of the year. One of the things a lot of school districts and student information system consortium support folks have mentioned is that it's helpful if you're one person doing all of these reports to print them out or send them in a PDF to the folks who actually know and live in this data every day and have them sign off and say, here's the report. I sent it to you on this date. You signed off. Yay, perfect. That way you can kind of calculate out of all these reports you have to look at. It's a good way to kind of manage and organize those if you have multiple people reviewing the data for the end of the year. All right, last step, at the very end of June, your district administrator, your superintendent typically, is going to approve the year-end collection. So you reviewed your errors, you've reviewed your reports, signed off on them, then your district administrator is going to log into advisor validation and they're going to approve the 22-23 year-end collection. I've linked some instructions here if they're a first-time superintendent and they might need some assistance, even if they're a returning superintendent. They only do this a couple times a year, so they may need a little guidance. But I think what's important to note is that we don't open this approval until a few days before the audit window is closed, because the expectation isn't that the superintendent is approving the data on June 15th, because we've still got a couple weeks after that time where the NDE is looking at the data, other school districts might be changing some of their data. So we expect some ebbs and flows of the data between that window. So we're not going to open up approval until like the very end of the month. And that's when your superintendent is going to go in and approve the collection. All right, so a few other reminders as you're reviewing your year-end 22-23 data. Focus on those kiddos that are coming back next year. Maybe they're not graduating, but they are in high school. Those kiddos still receiving services who are 18 through 21. Who are they? Make sure that their enrollment's not exited, that their SPED records are still open so they can be served next year. We don't want to exit those. And kind of next point, emphasizing the kiddos who are exiting from SPED. Who are they? Did they transfer out? Making sure their enrollment and their SPED data matches and it exit out prior to next fall. So a helpful hint from your student information systems, run those reports for your full year attendance data now, because when your audit occurs next fall, that information is not updatable anymore. So it's really important to look at it now while you can make changes and review it. And then last but not least, a reminder to just kind of review your exempt student list. There's a collection in the portal called Exempt School Report. Just make sure that you're verifying these students who have to reapply every year are still kind of matching in those scenarios so you can keep track of those kiddos. All right, so now switching gears a little bit. Still talking about 22-23, but the things that have updated this year, the things that are different year over year that we want to make note of. I'm going to go back to staff reporting. We had 2 new position assignment codes this year, one for substitute teachers, that's our 5190, and one for the activities athletic coaches. So the subs, we used to collect that in the CDC in previous years. So you've submitted it before. Now it just looks a little different because you're doing it in staff reporting. So that CDC collection's gone and you're reporting your subs and their days worked in staff reporting. The activities athletic coach, that's a new position. It's never been collected. So you probably have some questions about it. Take a look at the FAQs in the staff manual because it has some really good answers in there. If your question's still not answered, send us a ticket. We'll be sure to look into what data you report. We did have one position assignment code that was renamed, the instructional support paraprofessional, but there wasn't a ton of other changes to staff reporting this year. The last thing, though, to also notice, because we had those new position assignment codes, there's a couple new errors in NSSRS validation related to those. So once you've got your data in staff reporting updated, make sure it'll go into the secondary collection NSSRS validation and review those errors because there could be some new ones that popped up. If you looked at your errors earlier in the year, they may have been one way, but we added these midway through the year, so you may see some additional ones. All right. So then the updates for 22-23 advisor that are specific to advisor validation. We had a couple new data elements, and I'll talk about these a little bit, but Max has been talking about these for a long time every month at our data webinars. So a lot of this information has been talked about before, and we have resources, and I'll get to some of those resources later, but I just want to make sure that we note that. So one of the new data elements was attempt status. So that's that indication of the student's completion regarding that course, that fail, incomplete, withdrawal. And this is required for grades 9 through 12, if applicable, right? If they're blank, we're going to assume that they passed, no problem. So these are the various codes that are part of this data element here. The other big one, the new data element, is this instructional time plan. So this is the planned total number of instruction minutes for this course offering. Grades 9 through 12 again. Your calculation of 900 minutes equals 1 IU. We talked a little bit about this new warning that exists. I linked in here a presentation that Max did. It looks like this was back in last month in April. I might add another link here to today's presentation Max did because he had some additional really helpful stuff for that particular report. We had a new behavior data element. And then we updated some other data elements, the bullying and restraint, as related to LB 154. Again, Max has talked about this. We've got some previous presentations, even last year. So 2022, I have a link here. So if you want to go in and get a little more detail about that, you can review those. And I did put a link here for LB 154 as well, if you have questions about that particular ruling. So then with some of these new data elements, we have some new student verification reports. There's our instructional unit subject area totals. That's a big one. Lots of questions about that one. Teachers properly endorsed percentage. Max just spent a lot of time going through that one. And And then the instructional time plan and this attempt status have been added to a bunch of course reports. So you have a way to kind of view and analyze the data that's going into some of these calculations, right? So you can look at your course data to see, okay, did I mark this kiddo's attempt status correctly or not? So now, shifting gears again, this is our last time, we're going to talk about what's coming in 23-24. So we have posted the course codes and clearing endorsements for 23-24. So you can view those now at the course code site. Lots of changes. So I think it's going to be important that you review that changes tab. We had a bunch of fine arts changes, and we even had Cody come and do a presentation in April about that. There's been a lot of name and descriptor changes, many new course codes to add for 23-24, and then some endorsement updates. So I think it was kind of a record year for how many changes that we managed. So I think it's important to review that as you go into your planning for 23-24. We will have our follow-up collection that's due September 15th with an audit window through 10/12. That's your collection where you're able to make changes to your end data. Not that we don't want you reporting everything correctly now. It's just an opportunity to make updates if you need. And then the advisor fall collection, which is due October 15th with an audit window through 10/31. Some of the new data elements, again, that Max has been talking about for several months that are for 23-24 are the IEP, IFSP begin date. So that's the effective date of the kiddo's current IEP or IFSP. There's some optional reporting of some additional disabilities within a single record, which has resulted in a new data element called disability order. So the disability data element is going to stay the same. All those listed stay the same. But now we've got the disability order, which allows you to kind of indicate the order of the records and allows you to indicate multiple disabilities if necessary. Then we've got Part C to B transition delay reason. So this is a brand new element where you can report why the kiddo who's reached their 3rd birthday is continuing to be served in Part C versus B. Parent refused consent, parent chose to remain, other. So there's an opportunity for that too. And then last but not least, an updated data element is our language instruction. And we actually got rid of the code other. So you have to be specific with these options of how you're going to report the methods used to provide English language services to your kiddos who are in that program. Okay, additional information regarding any new changes to 23-24 will be in our advisor data guidance, data elements guidance. So that's coming soon for next year. And we'll be sure to get that posted to our advisor resources page. Speaking of, here's a bunch of resources. 1, service desk, email us. Anytime you have any question, please send us an email and let us help you if we can. We've got the NDE bulletin. This is a great place for up-to-date notifications. I mentioned one of the ones that accreditation sent just recently. We've got the monthly data webinars. Again, talking about how Max has done a lot of this stuff and presented a lot of this stuff to us already. So it's important to kind of stay in touch with those. And we do post the PDFs and recordings of previous presentations. So you can, even if you can't make it that day, you can watch it a couple days after if you want. And you can download the PDF to have it on your files. The help site where we have some errors listed. We also list the workday schedule there. So I mentioned there's 3 work days where this presentation is going to be displayed at. And we are asking for optional registration so we have an idea of a head count of who's coming. So you can click through this link and register there. And then last but not least, our advisor resources page. So this is the page where we'll post our 23-24 data elements document and anything else specific to advisor resources. Who reports what, when dropouts guidance. There's a bunch of really helpful things at that website. All right, so now let me look at my questions here. We've got Patty Wolf. When is affidavit due if we are short on instructional hours? I actually don't have that factoid memorized in my head, but what we can do is go back to the link to the bulletin in here, and I bet it's posted there. So Patty, if you can't find it, feel free to email us and we'll look into it for you. And then Michelle asks about error 455. I get this error even if I have, okay, so I think if memory serves, this is the one that talks about the SPED and early childhood program. So I think, Michelle, it might be valid to just kind of look at your district's data specifically. So actually, if you'll start a ticket with us, that would be amazing, because then we can help look into that and see why sometimes maybe it's popping up if you're reporting different codes for us.
Yeah, if we were literally getting a special ed record for that student in advisor, you would not get that error. So either common issues is maybe it's a record you just uploaded and you haven't reprocessed your error yet, or it's an issue getting the data to publish out of SRS or your SIS, whatever you use for SPED data. And really the key tool there I would recommend is using the student lookup by ID, where you put in that student's ID and you see all the data for them. And so that's really the quickest way to verify either we have a special ed program for that student or we don't.
Thank you, Max. Okay. I went through a lot of that quickly. So if you have any other questions, please send them in. I think it's important. Just come to a work day, ask questions there if you have any, or just submit a ticket to us. We are happy to help you at any time.
There's one more from Chris here. What is practice for 12th graders not graduating now? They come back after a year to take online classes to get their degree. I don't, it kind of really depends on what situation they're in. I don't think I can give you exactly one answer for that. There's various different reasons and different ways students would do that who don't graduate. I would just recommend you send an email to the service desk, Chris, and we could discuss it more if needed. Also, there may be stuff like in the Who Reports What document that may be helpful there, if I were to guess, but I don't think I can give you one answer to that.
Thanks, Max. Yeah, that's correct. We usually evaluate those on a per student basis many times.
All right, we can hand it over to Brian now. Brian, do you want to do the slides, or or I can do it? You're muted, by the way.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and do them, Max. Thank you. So give me a second. Let me share my screen and we'll be ready to go. Let's see where I share my screen. There we go. Sorry for the delay. Can you see my screen now?
Yep, I see it.
Thank you again for letting me come in and talk to the group. My presentation is going to be probably very much review for you, because I'm sure everyone knows about SLDS, or at least you're very familiar with it. So one of the reasons, Max, are you seeing my regular PowerPoint, or are you seeing the other sheet? Which one are you seeing?
I'm seeing the presentation mode.
Okay. So I need to. So SLDS, what is it? It's statewide longitudinal data system. For those of us that don't know what longitudinal data is, it's a panel data. So anything that involves repeated observations, the same things at different points in time, collecting data of the same things at different points in time. That's what longitudinal data looks like. SLDS was authorized by the Educational Technical Assistance Act of 2002. Title II of the statute created the Institute of Educational Science, that IES, and they're the ones who award grants. SLDS grant programs are awarded competitive cooperative agreements, and it's been since 2005. So all with the premise that better decisions require better information. So grants are awarded to provide successful design, development, use, and sustainability of that early learning through workforce longitudinal data systems. So like I said, this is old hat for most of you. Who receives the data? How's it protected? Who uses it? It's a picture that kind of just shows that the data comes from the schools, goes to the LEAs, and each one of those are secured at that point. It actually gets transmitted to the Department of Ed. And, all of this is through the premise that, the data specifically is protected. We don't want to just have open data that's there, except for when we get into the public information, where once the data is collected, it's some of the data is publicly reported, but it's not the actual data. It's not individual data. It's summary data. Excuse me. So we have data that's federal reporting. That's the SLDS data, the contracted data, and the independent research that people are asking for data. But of course, it's secure. So general information. Nebraska Department of Ed began developing student and staff level warehouse in 2004. You guys know that. It reports aggregate data to the federal government since the 70s. It uses a common, they call it a common core standard. It's, so that every field is mapped correctly. The common core standards have no impact on collection or reporting of data. And NDE collects a variety of information on Nebraska students, including such things as name, birth, race and ethnicity, gender, special ed, performance, state assessments. You can read the slide just as well as I can. We don't collect information on political affiliations, beliefs, sexual behaviors, attitudes, religious practices, behavioral testing, DNA, student access, emails, or income of the student or family. You can tell that it's required data is only provided in aggregate, meaning only state, district, and school grade level is provided, not student level data. NDE uses industry standard for collection, transfer, storage, and reporting of the data. All data is stored in a secure and encrypted database. NDE's data governance plan includes policies and procedures that meet industry standards for security and protection of student level data. NDE Research and Review Board reviews all research requests and approves only those requests that would be appropriate and met the requirements according to the Administrative Memorandum 711. So NDE receives the federal SLDS grant in 2007. We received it to enhance our then labeled NSLED, incorporating special day education and curricular segments implemented in the data quality curriculum. NDE received a federal SLDS grant in 2012 to enhance the NSLED through the use of development and implementation of data analysis tools for districts to use multiple logical and state data sources to produce reports. And then detailed information is contained in this link that you can click if you choose to. Just a brief history. You can see how the grants have been awarded. Starting in 2006, they had 14 states that were awarded a grant. In 7, there were 12. In 9, there were 27. In 12, there were 21. Where we're focused on is 2019. There were 28 states that were awarded the grant. And, the grant overarching meaning was improving infrastructure and using SLDS data. That's what we're focusing on as we are executing that grant. So Nebraska, in 2019, our subject area was modernizing data systems to support Nebraska education. We started it in March of 2020, and we're coming up on the end date of the grant, which is February 29th of 2024. Kristen Yates is the project director, and you can see the amount of the reward was $3,500,000. So what did we propose that we were going to do with that? We made reference that we were going to implement a data lake for agency-wide data consolidation, pooling of the data, making sure that it's all together, a data hub for standardization and complete CEDS, which is that common education data standards. It's mapping the data to the correct fields, development of an applications programmer interface, or they call it API, that provides full data interoperability across the agency with external SLDS customers, and then visualizing a proof of concept using off-the-shelf BI tools to explore the data intersections with early childhood and post-secondary education and workforce data. Really, what does that mean? There's a lot of words there, but our expected outcome is that we're going to develop, we've developed a mapping and data standardization. We worked on the infrastructure readiness and consolidated source data. We've done some data harmonization, as well as enhanced data discovery, optimizing the API, that's that applications program interface. And they've developed something called developed and deploy an API that's common across all the data. They call it one API, and it's meant to it's meant to make it easier for different systems to actually interact or ask for data based on that API, and then manage and evaluate the grant activities. So where's the longitudinal data today? I just took a quick clip of, our public NEP, where it's student membership. And this kind of hammered for longitudinal data, where you can see the data itself is in that table where it's collected year after year, grade by grade. And so it maps it longitudinally. And of course, you could do that for the school or at the state level. So what is this all about? Well, one of the things is we're coming to the end of our grant period. And we actually have to meet with our grant providers every year to talk about what our execution of our plan is. This year, they've chosen to come to Nebraska and do a face-to-face. And so one of the things that they've asked for is to meet with stakeholders and get their experience about using the longitudinal data. I put advisor in parentheses because that's how you would reference the SLDS as an advisor. So, the one thing I didn't put in this slide, and I'm sorry I didn't, they're going to be here on the 7th of June. So if you're interested in meeting with any of our grant providers, we'll have a Zoom or a Teams link to minimize travel costs. And potentially, if you're interested in present or sharing your experience with the grant providers, send me an email or give me and we'll try and get you on the list for potential interviews with the grant providers. The schedule of the day, it's really on the 7th, and the day is starting to fill up, and I think our stakeholder meetings are going to be in the afternoon. And so like I said, if you're interested, we're opening it up to find out if there's anybody that's willing to come talk to the grant providers. Are there any questions?
I'm
Okay,
not seeing
Max.
any.
Okay, so thank you.
All right, thanks, Brian. that's it for this month. As usual, within a couple of days here, we'll get the recording of this meeting posted here under the May meeting. I believe we've typically never done a June meeting for the webinars, or I guess it's probably only been 2 years, but just because, you know, everyone's busy with time with working at year end. So most likely our next meeting will be that second week of July. We will put an update in the bulletin once we've put that on the schedule and opened up the registration link. And again, coming up, just a reminder, like Naomi mentioned, there are a few work days coming up where we will be available to help districts with the year end. The link to sign up was in the advisor year end slides. So that's all I've got for this month. Thanks for joining, everyone, and we'll see you at the next one.
Thank you.